Okay, so I decided to focus on a study on the topic of emotional selection in memes in the case of urban legends, since we recently just went over the topic of memes being ideas in class. So, the author of this article and case study is Heath Chip, can be found in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. So, he talks about how memes are ideas and how it can be passed on through informational selection and emotional selection, citing Dawkins off of how informational selection is a truth or moral lesson, while emotion selection is evoke emotions like anger, fear, or disgust. So the study focuses on disgust due to elicitors being described. Um, so he decided to do his three studies. Study one being people were found to pass stories that elicited strong disgust. Number two would be variation among the subjects in disgust levels. And number three would be the classification of motifs and the spreading of these urban legends and memes. So this is Oliver Wendell Holmes. He was an economist. His quotes here saying, "The best test of truth is the power of the thoughts to get itself accepted in the competition of the market." So, two things to take away are ideas are competing and compete on the basis of their truthfulness. So, Richard Dawkins suggested the ideas compete, but not just on truth. And this study uses variation selection and retention approaches to analyze the meme or idea. So here's some examples of or here's an example of a meme or urban legend passed on through uh, generations. So if this year's Halloween follows form, a few children will return home with needles and shards of glass purposefully put into their goodies by adults. This was written in an article Best 1990, and some reports of minor cuts were inducted by the interviewers, but it turns out these were all old hoaxes, and that uh, memes undergo emotional selection and are retained in the social environment based on personality traits that are common among individuals. So these legends are viewed as true, and that's what makes them live on. But when the demand for news is down, that's when legends start going away. So here's just a informational selection. So it provides info, it's true and plausible, understand and simplify events. Rumors form from unsatisfied demands for news and goes down when demand drops. So memes contain useful and practical information or socially moral issues. So emotional selection explains memes, positive and negative, uh, explains new and pre-existing memes, and involves anxiety and identifiable emotions that humans exhibit. So they generally fall under these three categories. So moving on to study one. So emotional stories from books and articles containing disgusting motifs were gathered. People would say whether or not they would be willing to pass along the stories that exhibited higher levels of disgust. The objective was to see whether stories that evoke strong emotions were to be more viable to pass into or onto society. So they would rate emotional content of these stories. These were both internet and book articles. They would use a 7-point scale on how the story made them feel based on their emotions and indicate whether the story was true or not and whether it was interesting, something that people would think about passing on. So the results showed that the stories received mild ratings on emotion. Uh, Disgust was the midpoint of the scale. Joy and fear were listed the least amount of times, and whether a story was to actually occur or not were highly correlated, with a R value equal 0.89. So it was believed to be more plausible than to say it was giving practical information to the reader. The results provided reason to doubt that emotional selection requires pre-existing anxiety, but overall it does induce that discuss or stories that involve disgust were more likely. So study number 2. So control levels of disgust were changed in this one. So the levels of disgust for each story were classified as low, medium, and high. These are not determined or these are not shown to the people reading them, but usually revolved around the same conditions as the first study, but with varied results. So they rate characters and stories of trauma, and the results showed that passing of stories with high disgust conditions were shown more prevalent than least disgusting stories. And because of it being more disgust or showing more disgusting emotions onto the reader through the characters, they found it more interesting to pass along. So the last study, study number 3, this measured the distribution of the stories and urban legends and memes on social websites and such. So the study measured the distribution of the stories and the frequency of the motifs among the legends. Stories carried multiple motifs, with the average number being around 2.63, which is greater than 1. So over 78% of the stories had at least more than one motif, while 22% of the pool had more than 4. Table 6 shows how the motif scale predicts two aspects of selection. This study followed the other two studies' results. The stories that involved discuss motifs. So the right column was based off of the website popularity for stories. The chances of a story repeating and spreading would be based on the number of motifs that were found in the story. So a general motifs that were considered disgusting. The chances of the story being on another website increased by 20%. So for the study, they were able to determine that when there was some emotional issue, there was emotional selection happening. So some takeaways from the study. So the main point of the article was to determine how memes are selected from person to person. They choose contemporary legends due to being prominent memes in the social culture. Study 1 had controlled the truth and usefulness aspects of the stories. People were more likely to pass along stories that had stronger disgust. Study 2 challenged the level of disgust for each story, while also proving that stories with higher levels of disgust were more likely to be passed on as well. The last study showed how legends can have classifications of motifs present in each one to showcase disgust. Study 3 shows the emotional selection may alter the distribution of memes in the social environment. Overall, each study crossed over each other to prove that there is emotional selection present in meme distribution and retention. The most important limitation of the study was based on disgust because it's common negative emotion. Also, the reasoning behind why emotional selection occurs has not been brought up yet and needs to be conducted in further research. Thank you.